I'm Michelle Carr, Creative Director at Habit Action. Welcome to my podcast, Designed to Work. I'm excited today to be joined by Mike Walley. We're going to be talking about workplace, where it is today and where it's going in the future. We're going to go through findings and feelings, touch on form and function, also some case studies and some stories of Mike's journey, and finishing with some insights, some key takeaways for your business leaders out there, designers, for us to really consider as we move forward. So, without further ado, Mike,
Good
welcome.
Morning. Thank you. It's good to be here.
If I was to introduce you, I would introduce you as a workplace expert in workplace intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
You've been there, done that. You've delivered global projects from strategy through to workplace delivery, through big, small, everything in between.
When people ask me what I do, I sometimes just simplify it and say I find them, lease them, design them, build them and run them. Offices,
Fabulous.
And so, yes, I've done that now probably for the last 25 years.
I suppose before we get too far into the conversation, because I really love connecting with people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really kind of inspired by finding out new things. I'm really curious. What gives you joy in your life, Mike?
Back many decades, my first career I was as a chef, and food still gives me great pleasure to cook, to eat, to think about. So I think, cooking a good lunch on a sailing boat probably rounds it up.
Out in the fresh air,
Yep.
people socialising, eating, drinking. Wow,
Sounds
that's
absolutely perfect.
If we were getting into this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that you do and have done? Where did you start? Where did it all begin?
I've had quite a mixed career. And in the corporate world, I guess, I actually started in IT back in the late 90s when technology was still kind of a new thing in the business world and the internet was just really starting to make its mark. I found myself actually running IT for a number of interesting companies. One was a little startup that was trying to bring digital music to pubs and clubs across the country. That was quite fun. They were building digital jukeboxes from scratch. So they were building both the hardware and the sort of network stuff at the back. That was great fun.
Wow.
But that was a victim of the dot bomb at the end of the 90s.
Okay.
And I then ended up working for an American software house who wrote the software that controls all the oil refineries and process control. And it was while I was with them that I won't give you the long story, but I basically ended up also responsible for what was then called facilities.
Okay.
So I ended up a very powerful man in that company because I controlled facilities and IT. And I always used to joke that if you upset me, you would end up with no office, no mobile phone, no laptop, no parking place or anything. And it was then when I moved on from that company that I left the IT side behind and focused fully into facilities, as was then. And then it wasn't very long after that things started to change. And it sort of went on from there. That's really how I started in it. And I was lucky enough to be working with tech companies, successful tech companies that had a lot of money to spend and was able to experiment and to develop some fabulously interesting places to work. And not too long after I started in Workplace, I also became responsible for the portfolio and portfolio strategy and dealt with the real estate side of things as well. And it became then a nice rounded role.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were the main man holding the purse strings, the budgets.
Certainly for the real estate and the workplace, yeah.
Yeah, for the workplace.
Yeah, I think I always actually, because of the rents and things, I always had the biggest budget in any company.
I think budgets are really important in terms of when you are setting out on a project to really understand, what the budget is.
It certainly is. It's a very interesting discussion, if you like, the whole budget thing, because obviously, if you want to think of me this way, as the client, I have a budget in my head. You as a designer, if I don't give you that budget, if I don't give you some indication, then I've never quite understood how you're meant to do your job. And very often in the corporate world, the procurement guys will say, don't tell them the budget because they'll spend it. And it's like, I used to think, well, we're going to spend it anyway.
Yeah.
Trust me on this.
You're going to spend it on the right things.
So I've always found the budget quite an interesting one. But I think the reality of, what I do, it's, going back to your 4 Fs and the feelings thing, it's always a balance between building what you would like to build, what the team members would like you to build, and trying to do it within a budget that the finance director feels happy with.
Yeah.
And I think that's always the great conundrum, And into that, you've got a designer who wants to let rip and design the most wonderful offices ever.
Yeah.
So that's always been one of the biggest challenges. And I think sometimes you need to remember the people side of it so that you don't overthink it.
That's where the feelings really come in.
I say that carefully, looking at a designer. Sometimes they overthink it a bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, but that's how you iterate back to perfect. You need to overthink it in the design a little to be able to iterate back.
How have you, through your projects, got to understand and get the balance between the business needs and the people's needs? How have you crafted that through your projects?
Putting it simply and rather obviously, you have to talk to people. It's generally quite easy to get the view of the leadership. Those are the guys as a VP of real estate and workplace. Those are the guys I talk to. As a senior executive, you should really have a sense of where the business is going and what they want to achieve. It gets a little more granular when you start trying to understand what they want to build in terms of look and feel. Now, I spend a lot of time working for tech companies, so it was very easy to kind of keep an eye on the Googles of this world.
Yeah.
That the early Google designs, which were very flamboyant, and they kind of still resonate in that sphere in the tech world.
It's hard not to forget them, isn't it?
It's hard to forget them.
The fireman balls, the boats in the rooms.
And sometimes, leadership will want to lean into that heavily. I had one rather adventurous chap who wanted me to lift an Airstream caravan onto the 4th floor roof deck of an office in a fairly residential part of Zurich.
Okay.
Because he wanted to have a meeting room up there and he wanted it in an Airstream caravan. I mean, it cost an absolute fortune. But that was his vision. That's it. It's like, okay, there are points you have to just give in and go with it.
But
generally, the trick is to try and just get a wider sense of what they want. Do you want bright, engaging, lively, amusing, fun? Is that what you want? Or are you looking for quiet and relaxing and gentle? And, and if you can get that direction, then you can go to the designer and you can give them some guidance and say, okay, it's got to be bright and fun. And then I normally take the first iteration from a designer and then sit down with a representative group of the people we're building it for. And that's where they get their input. And I've found that's very helpful as part of the whole change management process as well, because you actually get them engaged. Sometimes, I admit, you need to be a little cautious how much leeway you give them.
Yeah.
But I've often found that it's wise to pick a few elements that they can influence. And often I will talk back to my design team and say, I need 3 colours for those meeting rooms that you would be happy with either one of. I want 3 different types of chairs for that area, either one of which you would be happy with as a designer. And then I can take those choices. And even they're small choices, but they're enough to engage people and give them a sense of ownership, which is very important. So that's how I would go about it.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
so you really curate the brief in effect. You
Yes, totally.
You went out to your wider team, your wider stakeholders internally, drew on and explored their their requirements, their needs, to really get under the skin of what the issues were or are, and what problems potentially you needed to solve.
Yes,
Did you
I think absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. What I would say is after, 10 years of doing it, I had a very good idea what the problems are, and they don't really change.
Okay.
Most of the problems are the problems anywhere. Noise. The truth of the matter is that very few people particularly enjoy open plan offices. So the trick is to make an open plan office feel like it's not an open plan office, and acoustic management becomes a huge, huge issue. And I would argue over the years that it is probably the single biggest issue that I've had to go back to designers with and say, you can't do that.
Okay.
That will not work. Because experience shows me, where, and fashions change. I can remember back in sort of early 2000s, there was a definite shift towards domestic style meeting rooms. We'll have armchairs, we'll have low tables, we'll have this, we'll have that. And that worked quite well. A lot of soft furnishings. It was nice
Formal lounges.
And curtains. They were big fun on the windows instead of just manifestation.
Yeah.
So that helped manage the acoustics. That was great. And then by about 2017, we'd suddenly gone hard.
Yeah.
We had Bolon flooring, a vinyl flooring. We had meeting tables attached to walls in Corian or hard surfaces, melamine like that. We had hard surfaces on the walls, very stark and bright with colour, not texture. But the big thing we had by then as well was the fact that we were using these rooms for not just for meetings, but for video conferencing as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really took off post-pandemic. It was already there a little, but as video conferencing arrived on our laptops and didn't require a room full of equipment, as it had done back in the early 2000s, suddenly every meeting room was a video conferencing room. And consequently, I had to go back to designers and say, I'm sorry, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And they'd say, what do you mean? I'd say, well, it's got a hard floor, hard ceiling, glass walls, hard table. The acoustics are dreadful.
Yeah.
And they'd sit in them with me and say, well, they're not too bad. And I'd say, open up a Zoom.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go out there. Okay. And then suddenly they would understand.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
So we were building, had to start building meeting rooms to fit the technology.
So I suppose if we step back a little bit, we're kind of getting into that form and function. When you were touching on the meeting rooms, and I think back in the early noughties, they were softer.
Yeah.
We had those kind of softer finishes, and then we transitioned to the harder in 2017, etc. But there was that space in between in those early noughties. Some of you probably be able to remember, video conferences were designed in their own particular rooms.
That was absolutely correct.
Those rooms cost 20,000 plus back in the day.
Totally.
They had the acoustics on all walls, the ceiling. The screen was ginormous, but the seating was tiered back away from, and these rooms cost
big
a
money.
bomb, but they worked.
Oh yeah, they did actually work because they were a single purpose room.
Yeah,
you can build anything as a single purpose something and make it work.
Yeah.
It's when you have to start mixing and matching stuff.
Yeah,
it gets really complicated.
Yeah.
And
so
also
the problems, I should say, like the issues when you talk about in the 2017s, the finishes got harder, the style got starker. the video conferencing was a little bit more ready and available. You know, you had the star phones on the tables, for teleconferencing. But goodness me, I mean, you remember the echoes around the rooms
dreadful.
with the glass, the glazing, hard surfaces, leather chairs, nice timber cladding everywhere. You know, that caused issues. But in my head, actually, it's not so different to the transition that we had when we came out of COVID, you know, post-pandemic, when the technology, you know, from your side is, you know, transitioned to being really flexible. Everybody's got laptops.
Well, I think what happened was also the way we used it was different. So there was video conferencing, and yes, you could do it on your laptop, and that was fine. But pre-pandemic, video conferencing was still very much a sort of event in the day. You know, we are going to come together in a meeting room, 5 of us, and we're going to join 5 other people on a video conference from the Paris office. And it was quite
it was an event. Yeah.
And it was the advent of COVID, where we're all sitting at home on our own, and we started doing one-to-one videos. You know, I wouldn't pick up the phone and talk to you on the phone. We'd jump on a Zoom, you know, or a Teams. And that really shifted the way that we work, because suddenly that's what people wanted to do. I want to see your face if I'm going to have a chat with you about something. I'm not using star phones anymore. I don't, in fact, I can't remember the last time I bought one of those.
Yeah.
Let alone use one. And so as designers, you know, as people interested in the shape of the office, we were getting another load of complaints, which, you know, change brings, you know, challenges. So the challenges were coming back at us that, you know, I can't do video calls at my desk.
Yeah.
And then I'd be, as the workplace guy, I'd be looking at the data coming out of the meeting room management systems, noting that the 12-person meeting room had an average occupancy of 2 people, you know, because people were just looking for spaces they could sit down with their laptop and do that video call.
Yeah.
And so that really shifted the design very quickly.
Yeah.
In, you know, we've had, I would argue, since the end of the pandemic, which was, what was that, 21, 22? Since that end, you know, people talked a lot about how the world of work has changed and flexible working. And, you know, I think the headline thing is that we don't all go into the office 5 days a week anymore. But the sub-headline, and this is the thing that really concerns designers, the sub-headline is we don't use office space the way we do, the way we used to. And so now what people are demanding are more desks in a given space, because during the pandemic, a lot of companies, and I mean a lot of companies, got rid of space.
Yeah.
But most people want to do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And as soon as you've got those 3 days in operation, you need almost as many desks as you would if people were working 5 days a week. And so what's happening is people are, you know, businesses are wanting more desks in the space they have, and more spaces for individuals to make phone calls or video calls or just get away from the desk and not annoy people.
Yeah.
You know, there was a brief moment where certainly companies I was working for were spending a fortune on noise-cancelling headphones for everyone.
Yeah.
But that only works up to a point.
It does. I find personally it's, you know, it doesn't quite work. If somebody else is in the middle of an office, you're on a Teams call, they might have the sound cancelling headphones on. But if somebody else is on a call on that same bank, you can hear exactly what they're saying, and you can't hear exactly, you know, the experience isn't really that positive.
They're quite isolating. If you're sat at your desk with headphones on, it's quite isolating. And it sort of, it negates a lot of the reason people want people in the office for.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen recent designs of office that were almost a throwback, as in it was a huge room full of desks, banks of them. But then at the end of the room, sort of 2 walls were lined with telephone boxes.
Okay.
And the advent of the pod or the telephone pod has been a big a big driver in the way that we now design offices. Now that we can do that quickly and simply with a piece of furniture, rather than having to construct them, I think that's driven a lot of change.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I'd just like to step back when you were talking about capturing, say, the uses of meeting rooms, you know, the use and the occupancy levels in the various companies and workplaces that you've delivered. How have you gone about monitoring and capturing that data so you knew that that 8-person meeting room wasn't actually used by 8 people, it was used by 1? How did you capture that?
Well, as you know, there are many different ways of doing it, some hugely technological. The most effective way I found was to employ a company to put people on my floors and walk around every hour with a clipboard and actually physically count.
Yeah.
You know, we trialed lots of sensors. The challenge I was facing was that the company I was working for was a French company, and the French work councils are very powerful, and they really did not like the idea of sensors. So the sensors that would work, they felt were quite invasive. So the only option I had left was people walking around with clipboards for 4 weeks. We did two 4-week sessions in sort of key parts of the year. So midsummer, and then that lovely winter bit that's far enough past the end of summer holidays, but not so close to Christmas, so that you're likely to have maximum number of people in.
Okay.
And in hindsight, I think that was probably the very best way to do it, because my later experiences with sensors were that they were easy to confuse. You could quite easily confuse a sensor.
Okay.
And so I think we got the very best data.
Yeah.
But we learned some really interesting things. It was probably the most fascinating piece of work I've ever done, because the data that came out of it was amazing. We discovered, and to be fair, this was just pre-pandemic. It was 2018 we did this.
Okay. So the old-fashioned way still works.
Oh, totally. And it was then we discovered that even in a Monday to Friday office, we were only ever using 50% of our desks at any given time, with absences, holidays, people being on the road, etc. Only 50% of desks were being occupied at any one time.
Wow.
And the perception of the user that we didn't have enough meeting rooms and they were always booked and they're always dreadfully busy was entirely wrong. We found that the meeting rooms were only being used at about 40%. Okay. The problem was everybody wanted them at the same time.
Okay.
And this is where this comes back to that thing where technology was starting to change the way we work. So even in 2018, we were already, as a tech company, we were quite heavily invested in Zoom calls, and people were starting to do more individual Zoom calls or Zoom calls with just 1 or 2 other people in other locations.
Okay.
And they were looking for meeting space to do it in. And at that point, we didn't have phone booths. You know, I remember vividly, we bought our first phone booths, a well-known company, starts with F. We bought our first phone booths in the middle of the pandemic for the Paris office, because we had certain people who simply could not work at home. And so we had to create a space for them. And we thought that we would try these phone booths as being quite secure.
Yeah.
In that you could sit in one and you weren't being breathed on by other people and so on and so forth. And so we did that. And we bought 5 of them in an office that could seat about 1,500 people. But we were only getting about 50 people in a day maximum.
Okay.
They became so popular that just after the pandemic, when we rebuilt that office and relaid it out and redesigned it, I put 150 pods across 8 floors.
Okay.
And there still weren't enough. People just loved them.
Wow.
So it's...
Were they in various sizes? Single, double?
Yeah, the singles were the most popular.
Okay.
And the larger singles, because there are some pods on the market that are tiny. And I can't even sort of sit upright. I'm not super tall. I'm only about 6 foot, but I'd sit up, bolt upright, and my knees would be touching the other side. But some of the more premium brands are actually doing bigger ones.
Yes.
With sit-stand desks and stuff, and those were immensely popular. And it was that started me thinking about how we're using them and stuff. And there's a lot of technical benefits to using them on the financial side, in terms of the way you account for things and how you write off or depreciate, I should say, various things that you buy, capital expenses and stuff.
So it's another angle to the budget, isn't it?
It is another angle to the budget.
And how that budget can be positioned, particularly if you don't know, what the budget is as a designer. Sometimes we don't get that.
Yeah.
But, I think don't technology companies, they're based perhaps in Germany, they look at
technology companies,
to other companies.
Publicly owned technology companies are usually on the NASDAQ.
Okay.
And the NASDAQ analysts, so the guys who are reporting on how well companies are doing, the guys that you spend a lot of time worrying about, they very often, in the technology world, are very often more interested in EBITDA.
Okay.
Earnings before tax, interest, deductions and amortizations. Basically what that means is that they don't pay very much attention to CapEx spend, and nor do they pay very much attention to dilapidations.
Okay.
So
does that mean that the budgets may be a little bit more constricted?
No, kind of the other way.
around.
They're a little freer with their CapEx spend. But it's for companies that don't run on the NASDAQ, on the more traditional, the London Stock Exchange or the DAX or the Nikkei. They tend to be a bit more concerned about P&L. And of course, as soon as you're looking at P&L, you are taking into account things like CapEx spend, dilapidation allowances.
You're looking at that bigger picture.
Yeah. Okay. And so the numbers suddenly go a bit funny. So if you can, for example, instead of building phone booths, which we have done in the past, great banks of them, they're very, very lovely to look at.
We do that quite regularly.
They're very expensive because if you're doing them properly, you're building all those individual spaces with heavy acoustic management between each of those spaces. If you're doing a row of them, you're having to put 2 and 3 layers of board between them on each side. That's an expense. But the big expense, of course, is the mechanical and electrical, trying to get airflow into each individual booth. I've been in booths where people didn't put the airflow in, and you can last about 10 minutes before you're, a sodden mess. So that creates not only a more expensive construction, but of course it puts a cost into the dilapidations.
Yes.
Whereas if you can now use furniture pieces, and that can be quite large pods for meeting rooms.
Yes.
I mean, putting it simply, if you don't have to build a meeting room and you can do it as a piece of furniture, that reduces the dilapidation overhead. It reduces the construction overhead because most of these pods take their temperature management from the area around them, so you don't have to stop moving. You
don't have to be fed.
Yeah, you don't have to start moving the mechanical and electrical. So I think it does have a lot of interesting benefits, the new selection of furnitures that are coming onto the market.
Yeah.
But I just still have to, on those rare occasions that we build meeting rooms, I still have to get the designers to stop making them like little echo boxes.
Note to self.
Note to self.
That's where I would kind of nod to value engineering, I think. And, we really can't, I think as a designer and as designers and in projects, you are managing things and you can put forward acoustic solutions because it'll help with the reverberation and make those spaces much more comfortable and usable. But, leaning into the budget side, unfortunately, it's one of the first things that gets VE'd. And say, oh, well, we can do it later if you find it's a problem.
Yeah,
it's like, you will find it's a problem. You really need to be addressing it now.
I've gone through that very much as well. Even on the client side, I show budgets to bosses and finance directors. And yes, for some reason, they seem to think that's one of the things you can, oh, we don't need to spend that much money on it. And then 6 months later, they're on at me going, I can hear everything that's going on next.
Yeah.
So, well, guys,
Okay.
we suggested this in the first place because you have to build, I mean, at the risk of getting too technical, if you're going to build a meeting room, you've got to build it slab to slab. You've got to go from the concrete underfloor to the concrete over ceiling, And if you don't do that, it's not going to work.
Yeah. You're going to get bleed, aren't you?
All
you
the
need
time.
your sound block board and the rest of it and your softer finishes inside.
And a little psychological thing here is that since we've all started doing individual video calls, I've noticed the demand for privacy has increased. It used to be that going into a room and shutting the door was somehow enough.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's changed, but the demand for privacy from individuals in an organisation has increased, and they want better acoustic privacy, they want better visual privacy, etc. So
I wonder if that's got something to do with that kind of privacy that you actually got or get when you're working from home. Generally, there's a lot of Teams calls happen when you're working from home as individuals. You're in your own private space. You're not being looked at.
I think there's a little bit of that. I think also the fact that we're mostly now not all sat in the room together as an issue. When you're face to face with someone, there's a sort of assumption of privacy, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I think the quality of the sound that comes out of speakers is very much more penetrative. So if you've got someone talking in a meeting room, you probably won't hear very much what they're saying. Whereas if you've got someone having a video conference, then you will almost definitely hear one side of that conversation, and that's the side coming out of the speakers.
It can be quite piercing at times, I suppose, depending on how...
and we just have to
on the tone
deal
of
with that.
voice. Yeah. So this is really good. We've kind of getting to the form and the function without really trying, which is fabulous. But being the designer that I am, and I've touched on budgeting, don't we all love budgets, but we love design a little bit more. It's that lovely tightrope walk that we like to, the path that we like to walk.
And I do really as well.
Yeah.
I mean, people love commissioning fabulous spaces.
Absolutely. And, I think it's one thing to design a fabulous space and to commission that fabulous space, but it's actually to see how that can positively impact the users of the space, both from a performance of the individuals, but from a business performance and a building performance. In your experience with some of those jobs you mentioned about that project in France, were there any real standout moments and features in those projects that really kind of captured the people, their desires and needs into the creating the kind of the appropriate form in the types of space?
Yes, I mean, I can think of two examples. I mean, that project that you referenced there was actually a global project. We rebuilt every office. Or first of all, we downsized the portfolio quite significantly from about 680,000 square feet to 250,000 globally. And we kept offices in key locations and then redesigned each one of them to get a unified feel across them. And we were redesigning Tokyo, Singapore, India, New York, Boston, Paris, Barcelona. So we were going across a lot of cultures, a lot of countries. And the two bits, and we tried to keep each site local, but also global.
That's
so we
really
wanted,
interesting.
we needed you to be able to walk into the site and know you were part of this global company, but also realize that you were in Tokyo, Barcelona, and so it was quite a fun thing to try and achieve. But two pieces, and then they were two meeting rooms that we designed and used in a lot of these spaces, almost as signature elements. They were really interesting because on day one they created absolutely opposite reactions, but by sort of end of the first month they'd come together. So the first one that was very positive, we created a circular meeting room.
Okay.
We called it the fireside. And it was a circular space with bench built in all the way around with a central table.
Mm-hmm.
And just a very small sort of cutout in the circle to use as a doorway. And then either side of that doorway, we had big screens that people could present onto. And it actually came, we pretty much stole the idea from Microsoft.
Okay.
Who had shown it as a concept for some of their new technology, and they'd created this space. And we thought, actually, that's not a bad idea. The campfire, we called it, the campfire.
Okay.
And they were immensely popular straight away because they were over sort of 8 foot high. So you were immediately insulated from the world around you.
Mm-hmm.
You could easily see whether they were occupied or not when you walked past.
Okay. So were they glazed?
No,
No?
wood
Okay,
frame
timber,
with
okay.
timber frames with a banquette seat inside all the way around. It was lovely. So they were very popular from day one, and they created a marvellous kind of vibe, and they were very different, and people enjoyed them. The other thing we built, and this was in response to discussions I'd had with various leaders, we built a meeting room that basically just had bleachers, like tiered seating, solid, but boxes all the way up, 3 layers. And they curved ever so slightly to just create a focal point where we then had a big whiteboard and basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And on day one, they were universally detested. I lost count of the number of people who came barreling up towards me saying, "What on earth is this? This is dreadful." I don't know. But they were designed in response to a series of complaints, just general complaints, not complaints to me, but just general complaints from particularly the engineering teams, managers, saying that they always found it very difficult having big meetings with their teams because they'd all sit down and open their laptops.
Okay.
And they couldn't get them to stop doing that. Everyone would, start a meeting and they'd say, right, no laptops. And everyone would sort of put them in front of themselves with the lids down. And then gradually, one person would open a lid and another person. And it was infuriating them. So I thought, well, why don't we create a space where you can't have a laptop up? And that's what we did. But funny enough, about a month or two later, one of the leaders of these groups sort of snuck up to me and just very quietly said, "They're turning out really well." I said, "Are they?" He said, "Yes, it's marvellous. Nobody can open their laptop. And actually people are engaging in the meeting more."
Okay. What size footprint of a room was that typically? If it was a typical meeting room size?
Yeah, I mean, we had some quite small ones.
6, 8, 12 person?
Oh, well, the thing is, of course, because you're going up in 3 tiers,
Yeah.
if you took a 6-person meeting room, you could get about 18 people in it.
Okay. Sat on each of the shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, sort of knees to shoulders.
Uh-huh.
So it was quite an efficient way of creating a meeting space for these big engineering teams who particularly liked working in bigger groups.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite an efficient way of using the space. We did learn quickly that you had to beef up the airflow in and out. But it also meant it was low tech because they didn't need presentation equipment or anything like that. They just wanted a really big whiteboard and all the seats. That's all they wanted.
Okay.
So that became very popular. They liked those a lot, and we put those in almost all those main offices.
Oh, and did that have tech integrated into it, or was it
No.
mainly analog?
Oh, it was totally analog.
Okay.
It's I found it slightly amusing how guys who are building some of the most advanced technology, these guys are all AI engineers and all this kind of stuff. They just love being analog.
Okay.
It's
Did they to put it all on Post-it notes?
Yeah.
And all other tech companies I've been in and worked with, everything starts with a Post-it note on the wall.
Yeah, those are all the little snags, and you correct it and you pull the Post-it note off and away you go. So I think those two were probably the most interesting moments I had.
Yeah.
Instant acceptance, instant rejection, but gradually it all came together.
Yeah.
I think the interesting point, though, which not a lot of people ever get to, is the change management. When you bring a new space online, you absolutely cannot assume that everybody understands how the office is meant to work the same way you do. Just because it's logical to you doesn't necessarily mean it's logical to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had two fabulous lessons handed to me over my career. The first one was some years ago. We moved a group from a very old 1960s office that was very long and thin and was comprised of a series of rooms. So there were people who had solo rooms, there were people in pairs, 4s, 6s, but not very much more than that. And we moved them to a modern, newly built, open plan office space.
Okay.
That's fabulous.
I bet they loved it.
They were very excited. They were really excited. They thought this was wonderful. But we failed to point out to them that you cannot operate in this space in the same way as you operated in your previous space. And the day one, I wandered in about 11 o'clock just to see how things were going. I tended to keep out of the way in the first few hours and then sneak in to see how it's all settled down. And I walked in to find one particular team in the middle of this space having a conference call on a star phone around one of the little breakout tables. And it turned out this guy always started his week with a conference call with the remote engineers. And he used to do it in the room that he shared with 3 other of the engineers. He was the leader of the team. He had 3 of his team there. And they would all just sort of spin their chairs around on a Monday morning and have this conference call. So he had got hold of IT and asked them to plug in this star phone on a breakout table in the absolute middle of this open plan space. And they all sat around having this conference call, driving everyone else nuts. And I had to point out to him that on the floor below, we had a range of meeting rooms. And he was horrified at the thought that he'd have to go down a flight of stairs just to have the call that he'd always had in his office or near his desk. And so that's one thing. You really, really have to sometimes state the obvious so that people understand how to use the new space. And the last example I have on that, which was probably the funniest I thought, was in this big rebuild that we did for the French company. And it was in the HQ where most of the engineers were. And we built this fabulous meeting room for them with huge interactive whiteboards. They could connect with design teams all over the world and video conferencing. Fabulous. And we put a particular furniture system in it. And this furniture system was comprised of boxes and planks and cushions, and you could basically build it into anything you want. You could build it into benches, into tables. You could build it into bleachers. You could just have fun and really, it was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Except we forgot to explain it to them. We assumed
They would know.
they would know. And so they looked at it and thought, well, that's silly. There's a bit of a bench and a bit of a table and a few boxes kicking around. Well, that's no good. And it was only after about the second week when I went back to Paris to see how it was going, I realized that every time they wanted a meeting, they rang my facilities team to come and remove this furniture system from the room and replace it with folding chairs for the duration of their meeting. And then when the meeting was finished, they'd take the folding chairs away and put this system back in the room. Honestly, I wanted to bang my head against a wall. I realized what an absolute mistake I'd made not explaining it. So we then had to run some training sessions to show the interested parties what they could actually do with it.
Yeah.
Then they slowly bought into it. But most of the time, people just want the easy option.
Yeah.
which is ring the facilities team to come and put some chairs in.
Yeah. Build it up. That particular furniture piece is just a wonderful concept. I think it's got lots of opportunities to build your own environment, which I think from a creative point of view,
From a
it
creative
sounds
point of view,
fabulous.
and I drank the Kool-Aid. Truth of the matter is, I'm busy. I want to rush into the meeting,
just want to get it done,
have the meeting, and then go back to my desk. I haven't got time to go and fanny about building Lego base.
Did you, on other projects, did you apply those learnings?
Yeah.
So, how did that impact your change management moving forward?
So, yes, no, I very much built it in to the interactions we were having with the end user in the design process.
Okay.
So as we've sort of built the change management, we started those conversations in that whole design process.
Yeah, so at the very beginning.
Yeah, just get it in there from the beginning. And so that managed to alleviate some of those problems. It also actually informed me about, what was important and what wasn't. And very often I've come up with fabulously good ideas that nobody could be bothered with. It's like, oh, please. It's like, yeah, but no, can't be bothered. We just want that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay. And you have to kind of give into it unless you are determined that there is a benefit to a problem, a bit like the bleachers meeting room where we knew there was a problem and therefore we kind of stuck our neck out and just held on to that idea and were thankfully proved right in the end. Unless you've got that, a lot of the time it's like, well, they're the guys who are going to use it. So you might as well just step back and let them have what they want because, experience tells me they will use it the way they want to use it. You can't, if it's easier to go in a door and turn left, people will do that. You can't say you've got to turn right and go all the way around the room because that's the way it's been designed. They go, okay, that's fine. And they'll go in and turn left.
Yeah. Okay.
So
did just on the other example of, engineering team that were in the open plan having their meetings, obviously in that scenario they'd have to go to another floor to have those meetings. Is that kind of a step forward probably of where we are today, where those pods and rooms are accessible from the floor of where they are? So you've almost got, and I know you don't like the word neighbourhoods, but you've got that concept where people are.
Yeah, I mean the reason I don't
them.
like the term neighbourhoods is that it implies ownership.
Yes.
And I have learned that you should never allow anyone to imply ownership over any piece of the office because they will defend it to the death. If you say this is your team space, but, the borders are soft and the idea is people can join in or no, but this is where your team will be, they will determine that those 6 desks belong to them. And if anybody else dares sit on it, they will throw them off, even if that's the only desk left in the building. That's my team's desk. Okay. So that's why I tend not to like.
Is it anchor point? Is that more?
Do you know, I've not yet managed to find a word that doesn't imply ownership in some way. Yeah. I tend to just suggest that, you let your team know that you'll generally be in this area. It's about as tight to it as I get. But yeah, it definitely has influenced the way that we build offices. Every mistake I've made has influenced the next office. And so it's an ever-changing thing. Yeah. But it is always very interesting just how many of the same problems appear all the time. Temperature. The skinny guy is going to be cold. The slightly chunkier guy is going to be hot. There's nothing you can do about it. You know, meeting spaces, doesn't matter how many you build. If there isn't one available when I need it, ergo, there are not enough meeting spaces. And so these are the, and if you tell me that this is the area I sit in, I will not let anyone else sit in that area. So these are the things you have to consider the whole time, the human element.
Yeah. That's the whole balance, isn't it? And I think that's what creates a successful workspace. You know, when you balance the environment, the physical environment, with the people. So, for the people that's listening and watching us today, you know, have you got some key kind of takeaways and nuggets of advice you would give? And then the last kind of question I wanted to ask you was, you know, what do you think would make this successful and future tech office?
So the key nuggets, well, the first one you'll like is always tell your designer how much money you've got to spend. It will save a lot of time and aggravation later on. I think I think we've sort of lent into them, but I would say listen, not just to the leadership, but listen to the guys who are going to be using the space. Leadership often have a very different view. You may have to become the advocate for the guy on the ground, you know, but listen to them, because you can't force people into things they don't want. It just doesn't work. You know, you can make the office in the way you want to make it, but if that's not what they want, they won't use it that way. Yeah. And you will waste time, money, and effort. So listen to the people, listen to the leadership, get the brief, and be that middle person, you know. And if you're like me on the client side, the people that have to be part of that conversation is also the designer. Yeah. You know, give the designer what he needs. So listen to the people and help the designer understand the brief. Tell them what the budget is. And change management. Never assume that somebody knows how to use the chair that you have chosen. You know, the office, you've got some concepts in your head, you have to share them. And if there are particular changes to the way people work, the way they walk around the space, you know, have you designed it with these particular walkways, for example, in mind, so that people aren't cutting behind people on the desk? You have to explain that, because otherwise they will cut behind people. You know, so explain what's change management, explain what's going on, listen to the people. I think those are the key elements. And, you know, when you listen, you have to be prepared to give way. It might not be that fabulous design piece that you wanted. Sorry. You know, thanks. Soz, you just got to give way. Yeah. I think those are the key bits, I would say. That's fabulous. So in terms of, you know, what do you, in your view, it would make, you know, the future tech office environment? I think it's leaning heavily towards what I refer to as the lean office. We are absolutely working with less space than we've ever worked with. You know, the amount of square foot per head that we're using, when I started in the business, it was 175 square foot per head. And we're now down to 75 square foot per head. So we're definitely building offices for more people in smaller space who are only coming in maybe 3 days a week, and therefore are very much more focused on what it is they're doing. They need a desk. They need access to meeting space, be it for a single person or maybe 4 or 5 people. They need somewhere to get coffee. And then they're gone. So it's very much, and I think the big challenge for a designer is how you build that office without making it feel like kind of a, you know, a battery farm. Yeah. You know, it can be done. It can be done. And there's some lovely, very lightweight partition systems that break the eye line up and stuff like that. But we're not building, you know, we're not wasting space anymore. So there's no fancy little breakout areas with chairs and things. So for me, I think the biggest change we're facing in the next few years is how to build that lean office and make it fun and comfortable, but make it meet the kind of fiscal drivers behind it. No extra space, more people in smaller space, still make it fun, still make it usable. There's some nuggets in there, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been
Thank
great.
you. It has been really good.